1177 BC was this year, this time period where all of the major empires at the time, all of a sudden, just vanished off the map, except for Egypt. But Egypt saw its decline from that moment onward. Egypt was substantially weakened, and they were never again this amazing empire that we know about from antiquity. So even Egypt suffered this death blow in this year. And there is all of this mystery surrounding this and all of these theories, and it's known as the end of the Bronze Age, okay? So y'all familiar with the fact that like historians organize time periods by technology, right? So you have the Stone Age, right? And then the Bronze Age, and then that made way. What came next? The Iron Age, yes. And then it gets a little bit more complicated. Some people will say the Glass Age came after that, then the Steel Age. I would say the Industrial Age, and so forth to today, which I'll get to in a moment. But this was a pretty big deal in history. This was a massive shift in technology, and it was a massive shift in the politics and in the nations of the world at the time. And so again, nobody knows the real reason why all of a sudden civilization fell apart in different parts of the world at the same time, okay? But some of the theories, and the lecturer that I watched, what he said as a scholar who wrote the book on the year 1177, he believed it was a perfect storm of a number of different things happening at once. And to me, that makes the most sense. So there was climate change going on back in this era with drought and a couple things. I don't think the chariots were guzzling gasoline then, so they couldn't blame it on that. But there was climate change happening at an accelerated pace. There was a lot of migration happening, people migrating from different countries that disrupted supply chains. And then there was some significant earthquakes that happened on top of all of this. So you kind of combine a bunch of this stuff, and there's some other theories about a couple battles that happened. And it leads down this road of saying, okay, we don't know fully what happened, but something drastic occurred. The world changed, and a new age began slowly over the course of like 2 centuries it took for humanity. And so I listened to this, and I thought it was fascinating, but I was like, you know what? I'm curious. Where does this line up in the Bible, right? They didn't mention anything about the Bible. Other than the fact that Israel was pretty much preserved from all this collapse going on. But I looked it up, and I found out that it is the exact time period that we are just beginning to study in the book of 1 Samuel. And the emergence of this prophet and then the coming of King David. And that, just really touched me, because I'm like, okay, this is interesting, because we just started this series on the book of 1 Samuel. It has nothing to do with it. This video that pops up on my feed, my YouTube, feed, but I just felt like the Lord was highlighting this for some reason to me. And as I prayed into it and thought about it more, I think that there's a connection between stuff that's today and what happened back then. And so first of all, even though historians won't talk about what are the spiritual reasons, like, why this collapse was going on, I think it's pretty obvious that God was up to something really big. Society was changing, and God had something planned involving the next stage of Israel's history, his people, right? There was something he was going to be doing on the world stage. And a lot of people, it's similar to what we do with science and religion, okay? People will separate science and religion when really these things go in sync. To any honest person looking at the facts, these things work together beautifully, but we make these distinctions. And the same thing you could say about history, world history, secular history, and biblical history. These things go together way more than we realize, and what's happening in the world scene often corresponds to what God is doing spiritually amongst his people. Does that make sense, that proposition? That what God does in his people can parallel what's going on in all the other nations? You guys tracking with me on this? So here's the bigger point I want to make. we're right now at the dawn of a new age of society, okay? So we're moving from the industrial age to the digital age, okay? And it's been happening for decades, already, but it really didn't accelerate until COVID. COVID was kind of like where the training wheels came off of technology and the internet, and we really saw, can this thing hold up the infrastructure of society or not? This was the moment where technology is really being given this go-ahead to say, okay, this is where the world is headed, and this is how society is going to function. And we're in the midst of a transition, and some people who are used to the Bronze Age or the industrial age are not totally ready for the iron or for the digital world, but it's coming regardless. And this is happening in the midst of a perfect storm, similar to what I said about the Bronze Age collapsing with not just COVID, but a number of major political changes and all kinds of other stuff, climate shifts and things in the world. And so I believe that just as there is a cataclysmic shift happening in society today, there's also a shift that is and will be happening amongst God's people, the church. Jew and Gentile together, Israel and the body of Christ. And I feel like God confirmed this in such an awesome way when I went to the place where 1 Samuel opens up. So I went to Shiloh in 2017, to the exact place where Hannah prayed for a child, and God gave her that child, and that was where she dedicated him to the Lord. And I got to go on a tour. Many of you remember this, through the whole Holy Land thing, but specifically to Shiloh, which is a place not many people get to go because it's in more of a dangerous area. So most tours through the Holy Land don't cover Shiloh because of the political situation there. But I was with a crazy group of people who just decided to go anyway, so we were like, let's do it. So we went, and we got to see where the Ark of the Covenant was, okay, where it actually, this site is one of the few sites where they know it's like, these are the rocks where it was. Like most sites, it's a frame of reference of like a mile or so. There's no exact way to say where some of these ancient things and thrones and furniture and stuff were, but this is one of those areas because of a bunch of things I won't explain now. They know that this exact plot of land in the middle of the desert is where the tabernacle was, and they're still digging up parts of it from that time period that this book takes place in. So I was at this exact spot where Hannah had this intense experience of prayer, and I had an intense experience of prayer here that I want to share with you guys. So we went there with a group. It was a big group. There was 3 buses of us going around the nation, and it was probably, I'd say, around 80 people or so. And we were with Dr. Brian Simmons and his wife Candace, who are the lead translators behind the Passion Translation Bible. And they've become good friends, and they're amazing people. But they get people together from all over the world, and they go to Israel, and they do a bunch of stuff there, ministry and different things. And so they gathered us together around this spot where the tabernacle was, that small tented temple area with the Ark of the Covenant, the holy place, all of that. And Candace stood up in front of the group as we were all kind of getting situated, and she said to the group, I had a dream last night where someone was starting a new church. And she said, I feel like we need to pray for someone in this group that's starting a new church. Now, no one raised their hands. But I had this feeling that I was supposed to raise my hand because this was October 2017. This was like 2 weeks after we announced that we were changing the name of the church. So this message today is titled The Dawn of a New Era. And while all of this was going on with Eli and his sons, civilization was collapsing. I want you to just remember that, what we said. The Bronze Age was ending. The world was changing. New technology was on the loose. It might seem archaic to you, iron, but back then iron was like nanotechnology and AI. It was the big thing on the horizon. And the world was changing, and Israel was about to experience a very difficult season. But it was all a setup for the coming of the king. We're going to get there, all right? But I feel, just as Israel, up to this point, was a bunch of different tribes who would soon become one nation under that king, God is preparing all the different tribes of Christianity to come together under King Jesus like never before. And he's actually going to use technology as a tool in his hand to help make that happen. But I want to close this message by reminding you that the dawn is still very dark, okay? Anybody up at 6 this morning? I know you guys were back there. The dawn is still so a new day starts with just a pinprick of light in the distance. It's how it works. Darkness appears to overshadow the light while the dawn is still happening. The good news is that if you can embrace a life of patience, which you need grace for that, you will experience the light getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And it's only going to get brighter, even as it appears darkness seems to win out in our world, even still.